Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada on August 22nd, 2026 for Reason to Resist. Have Canada and the United States been plunged into a trade war? Well, judging from the events of the past 24 hours, rather dramatic events, one might be justified in thinking so. The Trump regime just implemented its threat to impose 50% tariffs on a range of Canadian products, and the Canadian government has announced that it has withdrawn its negotiators from talks over a new U.S.-Canada trade agreement. In addition, Prime Minister Goldman Sachs, otherwise known as Mark J. Carney, has also announced that Canada will impose retaliatory tariffs on certain U.S. products on a dollar-for-dollar basis. In this report, I'll examine these important developments, and we will also speak with Canadian author and activist Yves Engler about the true agenda of Mark Carney. Now, before we begin, please remember to like and share this video if you find it to be informative, and we are getting very close to our goal of 200,000 subscribers by the end of the month. Please help us to reach it by becoming a subscriber if you are not already one. So with that, let's get into it. Mark Carney issued a statement this morning announcing the suspension of U.S.-Canada trade talks, and here is a portion of that statement. I'll read to you the most pertinent extract from it. In recent weeks, we made important progress toward improving Canada's position as having the best deal in the world with the U.S. However, the progress has not been enough to meet our objectives for Canadians. As a result, this evening, I have decided to suspend trade negotiations with the U.S. and have directed Canada's negotiators to return to Ottawa. They have worked hard in good faith to defend the interests of Canadians throughout these negotiations up until the very last minute. However, last-minute changes in the U.S. proposed terms were unfair, uneconomic, and called into question the reliability of any deal. At midnight tonight, the U.S. intends to impose a 50% tariff on roughly $28 billion of Canadian goods. Canada will match these tariffs dollar for dollar to protect our workers and businesses. In the coming days, the government will introduce additional measures to support Canadian workers and businesses, building on the nearly $25 billion in support provided over the past 18 months. Now, the first question I had when I read this is, why did Carney ever think that the Trump regime was negotiating in good faith and was a reliable negotiating partner? This government, not to mention prior U.S. governments, of whom you could say the same, has repeatedly lied to, cheated, and conned those with whom it negotiates, including states to which it pretends to be friendly. So there's really no reason to have expected that there was another reliable negotiating partner on the other side of the table, or that they were acting in good faith. But Mark Carney seems to have been caught by surprise in that regard. Furthermore, the very beginning, at the very outset of this process, Trump made very clear that he believed that Canada was ripping off the United States, and that the goal of these negotiations was to extract from Canada advantages and impose upon Canada disadvantages, which in Trump's view would bring to an end the unfairness in the relationship. Trump was not looking for a win-win outcome. In other words, a new deal that would be good for both United States and Canada. He approached the negotiations as a zero-sum game in which the U.S. would emerge as the winner and Canada the loser. This was explicitly the framework he adopted at the very outset. And therefore, again, I ask, why have we been engaged in these failed negotiations to begin with? Now, yesterday, I published a report in which I predicted that Carney's government would sell us out in these negotiations. Judging from today's events, I was wrong. Or was I? Well, first let me say that to be wrong. I don't want this country, which I am a citizen and in which I live most of the time, where I've spent most of my life, to be run by a vassal of Washington, by somebody who's going to sell out the national interest in ordinary citizens. I would be ecstatic to be convinced that the Prime Minister of Canada and the current government of Canada have the spine to stand up for Canadian sovereignty and are committed first and foremost to the well-being of ordinary citizens. If I ultimately am wrong, I'll be the first to cork open the champagne and say a toast to Mark Carney. But I continue to believe ultimately that Carney likely will sell us out. Now, you may very well ask, why do I continue to have that view? Well, because that's what Mark Carney's record has been up until now, during the time he has been Prime Minister of the country. And I am firmly of the belief that you are what your record says you are. Let me give you some examples. First and foremost, when Trump demanded that Canada and other NATO vassals increase their military spending to the ruinous level of 5% of GDP, Canada had never even consistently achieved the prior lower NATO target of 2% of GDP. Donald Trump, Mark Carney immediately complied without giving any serious thought to how this was going to impact the government's ability to improve upon or even just maintain the current level of social spending in the country, how this was going to enable Canada to strengthen or at least preserve its existing Medicare system, its existing educational system, maintain the existing infrastructure. And in fact, this is going to be impossible because of Mark Carney's precipitous agreement to adopt this ruinous level of military spending, which, by the way, has no rationale behind it whatsoever. There's no magic, there's no formula, there's no science behind 5% of GDP. It's just a gigantic number that Donald Trump pulled out of his ass in order to ensure for years to come the enrichment of the U.S. Weapons makers. That's really what this is all about at the end of the day, and also enabling Canada to facilitate the U.S. wars of aggression abroad. So in order to placate Donald Trump, Mark Carney immediately agreed with almost no public debate to an extraordinary level of military spending that would ultimately oblige the Canadian government to engage in vicious austerity and embroil it even further in U.S. imperialism. But that's not all, folks. There's also the digital services tax. This tax was abandoned on June 29th of last year. And here's the statement by the Canadian government explaining why it had made this decision. Canada's new government is engaged in complex negotiations on a new economic and security partnership with the U.S. Prime Minister Carney has been clear that Canada will take as long as necessary to achieve it. To support those negotiations, the Minister of Finance announced today that Canada would rescind the digital services tax in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade agreement. I repeat, in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade agreement with the U.S. Consistent with this action, Carney and Trump have agreed that parties will resume negotiations with a view towards agreeing on a deal by July 21st. So basically what happened was Trump demanded that the digital services tax be rescinded because it was going to impose a relatively small tax burden on big U.S. tech companies who were making lots of money in Canada without paying fair share of their taxes. This DST, according to the statement, was announced in 2020 to address the fact that many large technology companies operating in Canada may not otherwise pay tax on revenues generated from Canadians. Canada's preference has always been a multilateral agreement, blah, blah, blah. So Carney's government abandoned the digital services tax, which was designed simply to make it fair, to ensure that tech companies operating in Canada were doing so on a fair basis. And the reason why he did that, they said, was in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade agreement with the U.S. Well, that has turned out to be a disaster. In fact, we've just learned that the negotiations were not being conducted by the U.S. in good faith, and that they were demanding too much of Canada, and that they were looking at this as a way to extract disadvantages or advantages from Canada that would ultimately make Canadians poorer. So what did we gain by abandoning the digital services tax, Prime Minister Carney? Absolutely zero. That's what we got. And then there's the Gordie Howe Bridge scandal. Yes, Canada invested $6.4 billion. That's money that Canada paid. That's a lot of money, by the way, for Canada, which has an economy about 1/10 the size of the U.S. economy, in order to build a new bridge from Windsor, Ontario to Detroit and facilitate traffic, but something which would be of mutual benefit to the United States and Canada. You know, people who cross that bridge from Canada go to the United States, they spend money. This is good for the local economy in Detroit and in Michigan. And also, this bridge was going to facilitate trade between the two countries. Canada paid for all of it. And what did Mark Carney do? Because Donald Trump complained, he decided to share the revenues from the bridge with the United States. Now, I ask you, my friends, if the United States had paid $6.4 billion for this bridge and had borne the entire burden for building it, do you think Donald Trump would be willing to split the revenues from the damn bridge? I don't think so. And then, of course, there is the shameful episode of Mark Carney jumping on the Iran war bandwagon on the very first day of the war. This is the statement he put out on February 28th. On that day, the American military and the Israeli military, or both, attacked civilians across the country. That was the day on which the U.S. destroyed the Minab school with Tomahawk cruise missiles, killing 168 students and teachers. That was the day on which the United States flagrantly violated the UN Charter. And this war has brought the global economy to the precipice of collapse, or at least a crisis of perhaps historic proportions. And what did Mark Carney say on that day? He said, Canada's position remains clear. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the principal source of instability and terror through the Middle East, has one of the world's worst human rights records. No, the United States and Israel have the world's worst human rights records, and they must never be allowed to obtain or develop nuclear weapons. So here Mark Carney was lending legitimacy to the fake pretext for the war, which was that the Iranians were trying to develop a nuclear arsenal. Even the CIA, even Tulsi Gabbard, agreed that they were not trying to develop a nuclear arsenal, but Mark Carney repeated the lie in order to lend legitimacy to Trump's stated justification for this criminal war of aggression, which, as I say, has now placed the global economy in immense peril. You know, and just a little while after that, the Canadian Minister of War, David McGuinty, he calls himself the Minister of Defense, but this is all about war, folks. What did he say? He said there's little daylight between the U.S. and Canada. Okay, this was last month. At the time that McGuinty said this, the United States was enabling Israel to carry out a genocide in Palestine and Lebanon. The United States had launched a criminal war of aggression on Iran in flagrant violation of the UN Charter, which was imperiling the global economy. And the United States had kidnapped Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, killing numerous innocent Venezuelans in the process, again, in flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter. And so Carney's defense minister, Minister of War, in those circumstances said there's little daylight between the U.S. and Canada. So forgive me, my friends, for having little confidence that ultimately Mark Carney is going to stand up for the sovereignty of Canada and ensure that there is a fair trade deal. I'm going to offer to you an alternative interpretation of what is going on here. As I've said many times, the liberals are, if anything else, masters of manipulation of public opinion. And I believe that this is effectively Kabuki theater, that the Carney government is going to return to the negotiating table sometime in the reasonably near future, maybe weeks, who knows, maybe days, almost certainly sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, and that it will complete the negotiations, will agree to a deal that is unfair to Canada, and that may well constitute a complete sellout of Canada. And then it's going to point back to what happened today and say, look, man, we tried our best. We negotiated hard. We pulled the rug on the negotiations. We imposed dollar for dollar tariffs. By the way, the goods, the percentage of goods that are being subjected to Trump's tariffs is a tiny portion of overall U.S.-Canada trade. So it's actually not nearly as dramatic as you may think, both the Trump tariffs and the retaliatory tariffs. But I suspect that this is a spectacle, the ultimate purpose of which is to enable Mark Carney, when he ultimately does the deal, to claim that he negotiated hard and he did everything he could to get the best possible deal for Canada. I would love, again, to be proven wrong about this, and I very much hope that Prime Minister Goldman Sachs sticks to his guns and is true to his word and will not do a deal that is bad for this country. With that, let's bring author and anti-war activist Yves Engler into the conversation. Yves, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So Yves, first of all, I'd like to get your take on the current state of the negotiations between the United States and Canada on the trade front.
Well, I basically buy Carney's description of what happened, which is late in the negotiations. The Trump administration brought in some shifts on what the auto deal would have. So basically excluding bigger vehicles that were implicit and just having cars, and also bringing some further constraints on Canada's ability to sign accords with other countries. That makes sense to me in both ways, in the sense that the Trump administration would do something like that. And also, I believe that Carney is desperate to have a deal. And so he's been sort of bending over backwards to have a deal. And the Trump administration knows that and tried to push it one step further, thinking they might get away with it. So that makes sense to me. I'm obviously not privy to the negotiations. I think the big picture here is that Carney and a large swath of the capitalist class in Canada are desperate to maintain this this accord that they think has been very important for them in terms of creating billionaires and creating extreme wealth inequality. And has been good for business. The vast majority of the public wants to be much more combative than the upper echelons of Canadian society, and so yeah, Carney's desperate for an agreement, and he got played by Trump in the last minute.
Yeah, I saw a poll today which indicated that 56% of Canadians want Carney to stick by his guns, and I think it was only approximately 30% wanted Carney to make further concessions. This was before what we've learned during the past 24 hours, and I think once Canadians hear how duplicitous the United States was in these negotiations, probably the proportion of Canadians who will be opposed to concessions is going to go up considerably. Now, you have been very much engaged, Yves, in organizing around an event called Confront the CEO Summit. And I'll just put up on the screen here the poster that, well, I'm having some, there it is. There is apparently a large protest, and I believe there are other actions planned for Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto on September 14th. Could you tell us about this CEO Summit? What is it all about, and why are you helping to organize opposition to it?
Yeah, the first thing here is to understand Mark Carney. You refer to him as Prime Minister Goldman Sachs. That's correct. And this summit is the kind of embodiment of that. And basically what Carney's doing in the context of sort of Trump leading to economic uncertainty and different threats and tariffs and all this kind of stuff from Trump, Carney has convened 100 of the wealthiest and most powerful capitalists from around the world to this summit in downtown Toronto. They boast that the group that they're bringing together is in control of $120 trillion, more than $120 trillion. Things like groups like BlackRock, Blackstone, the biggest investment management funds in the world, big pension funds around the world, the sovereign wealth fund from Saudi Arabia, and they're basically going to have this summit framed as trying to generate investment in Canada. In practice, what this means is further sell-off of public assets. There's talk, a number of reports saying that Canada is going to announce the privatization of the airports at the summit or just before the summit. They buy into this huge new tar sands expanding pipeline project. This is really kind of like, in my opinion, symbolizes what Mark Carney is all about, which is luxurious hotel with the wealthiest capitalists to decide Canada's future. And not just Canada's future, of course, because part of the project is just the expansion of this heavy carbon emitting tar sands in Alberta. Part of the project is also this radical expansion of military spending that Mark Carney has pursued. Actually makes Justin Trudeau look like a peacenik compared to what Carney's done over the past year and a half. Just an incredible expansion of Canadian military spending, and this NATO war bank that is also going to be on the agenda at this CEO summit, which Canada has led in establishing, which is really just further marrying international finance and the arms industry. So this is what Carney is doing. It's I've dubbed it Davos downtown Toronto. It's audacious, I would say, from the standpoint of the Prime Minister. These types of summits of certainly Davos, it's up in the hills somewhere in a small town in Switzerland. It's very difficult to demonstrate against. Usually they've started turning over the past 15, 20 years, the G7 summits, they, instead of having them downtown, which they did, pre Seattle in 1999, after mass protests, they started hiding in the Kananaskis or Montebello or different, resort places off. And now they're doing this right downtown Toronto. And so what I see this as not just an opportunity to push back against this class of wealth concentrating ecocidal capitalists that are going to be there, but also to tag Mark Carney with exactly what you say, Goldman Sachs. This is who he is. He's been sort of, the Canadian public has been kind of wooed by this notion that he stands up to Donald Trump. He's this sort of technocrat, but he is very clearly following an agenda of the global rich. And so this summit is an opportunity to paint him as exactly what he is, which is a banker prime minister serving a very select few of the world's wealthiest.
Yeah, and so how can people get involved in organizing against this travesty, Yves, other than showing up at Nathan Phillips Square on the 14th?
Yeah, there's a whole counter summit happening on the Saturday night, on the Sunday before, and then the demonstration. People can find out info on this. Capitalism Can't Be Fixed's website, Capitalism Can't Be Fixed. Also in other groups, the Council of Canadians is organizing two of the summits. So there's information out there on there are summits called the Many versus the Money. Our event on the Sunday nights called the Carnival Against Capitalism. It's happening at the Workers' Action Center in Toronto. But yeah, there's lots of information on Capitalism Can't Be Fixed site, on the Council of Canadians, and also there's stickers, posters, leaflets, all of that circulating in Toronto.
Okay. Now, Yves, it sounds like you watched the press conference that Carney gave this morning. Just a few minutes ago, he concluded from around, it went from around 11 to noon. Did you see the press conference?
I didn't see the press conference. I've just seen some summary of it.
Well, I just want to, I did watch it in full. By the way, that's the first full press conference by Mark Carney that I've forced myself to watch, because this is such an important development for Canada. A few observations, which I'll share with you and our audience. First of all, numerous times during this press conference, Carney bragged about lowering income taxes. So rather than actually try to address growing inequality in this country by increasing taxes on the wealthy, he is decreasing them and bragging about it. He bragged about doing a trade deal with the United Arab Emirates in record time, something like 47 days, which apparently is unprecedented. And of course, the UAE is one of the most heinous human rights violators in the world, not to mention the fact that doing a trade deal with the UAE is not going to have a material impact on Canada anyways, because of the limited nature of its economy. What the UAE has, what do we have need of that for? It has energy. Canada has plenty of that. So why is he rushing to do a trade deal with one of the most sadistic, barbaric regimes in the world? And he also talked at length about spending massive amounts of money on infrastructure. To your understanding, Yves, this is something that he keeps waxing eloquent about. How much of that infrastructure is non-oil related? Because I understand he's obviously investing a lot of money, or wants to, in building more pipelines. But how much of it is actually non-oil related? What major non-oil infrastructure projects do you understand him to have committed to?
Well, they did just 2 days ago announce $10 billion in federal government money for the Quebec and Newfoundland expansion of hydroelectricity. It's all very early stages. There's nothing confirmed in it, as my understanding. But I think that the first thing on the income tax, one of the first things he did was there was a planned increase on capital gains tax. So people who make money off of money pay a lower rate than people who make money off of working, and it was scheduled to increase the proportion. I think it was going to go up to 2/3, or maybe it was going to go from 2/3 to 3/4, and he cut that. He also slashed the digital services tax, which was going to bring in multiple billions of dollars from major tech companies. And he's done a whole series of other measures within the tax code that are designed to, enable the billionaire class and to put more of the burden on working class and lower income people. Now, when we talk about these kind of infrastructure things, it's just so very obvious what if you want to invest in Canada and you want to deal with inequality and you want to deal with a big crisis that we have, it's housing. Right? You build more housing, public housing. First of all, that's jobs. Almost all the materials can come from inside of Canada, and you deal with a huge problem that's just self-evident. I was walking my son the other day, right where we live, and he's 9 years old, counting all the people unhoused on the street. It is actually stunning. You just sort of take it for granted, but it's a huge problem, and it can be dealt with by public housing and that type of investment. But of course, the bankers, the Goldman Sachses of the world, the RBC and whatever, they want the financialization of housing. And so, the public building lots of social housing is not a model of infrastructure, development that they want. They're okay with more housing, but they want that done in a way that serves capitalist markets. And so, I think that this is what he's doing in this business with the UAE. This is a model of quote unquote development that is completely open to the just wealth concentration, completely open to fossil fuels and more fossil fuels. The social side of things is just not part of the equation. It's how do we make profit quickly. And then, when he's talking about privatizing airports, that's some of the few public assets that the federal government still has that and this is just throwing it out to the market. And in the past, that's been, incredibly damaging.
Right. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about, Yves, you've been effectively persecuted over the last couple of years by Montreal police for your peaceful disruptions of various ne'er-do-wells in the media and political landscape. So, for example, we've covered extensively on this program your prosecution by law enforcement authorities here over your criticisms of Dalia Kurtz, a racist, genocidal maniac who's very active on X. And more recently, you had a run-in with an Islamophobe in the local media by the name of Richard Martineau, who is a columnist, a very prominent columnist for the Journal de Montréal. And you ended up having yet more issues with the Montreal police. Now, before I ask you about that, I just want to show people I went on to Martineau's Facebook page today just to quickly see what he's saying about Muslims. Here he's talking about about Quranic radicalism, the new totalitarianism, and how it's essential that we confront this. This is all just within the past few days. He put up images of children wearing a hijab. This apparently he finds this deeply offensive. This is another one he put up which offended him. Here is a post which I found on X. Oh, actually, this thing also comes from Facebook. And he says that the victims of Islamism in France from 2012 to the current time, 263 persons. The victims of Islamophobia, 0. This is a flagrant lie. Flagrant lie. I don't know where he's getting that 263 persons from, but there are victims in France, not necessarily being killed. But I have family in France on my wife's side who are Muslim, and they're constantly expressing concerns in their conversations with us about Islamophobia in France, which is rampant, and how they feel afraid. So this man is, I think, quite clearly an Islamophobe. He also happens to be apparently a narcissist, because he puts things like this on his Facebook page, where he imagines himself taking on Bruce Lee and others. He's quite a bit of a kook, as far as I can tell. So now, before we get into what happened, I'd like to show the video that you posted of your interaction with Martineau, the one that, and you'll see in this video the cops showing up.
Martineau, vous soutenez le génocide à Gaza? Oui, vous continuez à soutenir.
Now, I'm just going to stop there. So for those who don't speak French, all Yves asked him was, do you support the genocide in Gaza? That's it. And the first thing out of his mouth was, you continue to harass me? Watch what happens next.
Le génocide à Gaza? Hein?
Merci de faire ce que vous faites.
Excellent, excellent. Ouais. Oui, comme j'ai le droit de m'exprimer maintenant.
Mais là, ça va parce que vous êtes en train de les agresser.
Je suis pas en train d'agresser. Non.
So I assume he's calling the cops there, Yves. Is that right? I think you're muted. Is he calling the cops there?
He's calling the cops, and he just instantaneously started calling the cops when I started asking him a question.
Right. Okay, let's watch some more.
Pardon?
Présentement, tu es détenu pour fin d'enquête sur des menaces. Okay?
Des menaces de quoi?
Tu es soupçonné d'avoir fait des menaces.
Des menaces de quoi?
So he says you're suspected of threatening Martineau because you asked him if he supports the genocide in Gaza.
Je vais te donner tes droits. Tu es détenu pour fin d'enquête. Il est 17h51, OK? Tu as le droit au silence. Tout ce que tu vas dire pourra être retenu contre toi. Bien compris?
Vous êtes pas sérieux.
Oui, je suis sérieux. Pour ma sécurité, j'ai le droit à pouvoir de fouille. Sors tes mains de tes poches. Sors ta main de ta poche.
Moi-même la poche.
Okay, again, for those who don't speak French, Yves is expressing his astonishment that they're taking this allegation seriously, that he threatened Martineau.
J'ai le droit à pouvoir de fouille. T'as quelque chose de piquant, coupant, tranchant sur toi?
Oh, regarde ça! Oh, regarde, monsieur Martineau! Félicitations, vous avez la police ici! Félicitations, monsieur Martineau! Avec ma petite fille! Et vous marchez les moulins de la police parce que j'ai tout demandé des questions et j'ai tout ça sur le vidéo. Félicitations, monsieur Martineau! Félicitations, police! Et faire la répression d'un maudit commentaire pour le journal mort, une islamophobe! Hein? A fucking racist genocide supporting Islamophobe. We got the police here.
Well done, Yves. Yves, what has happened since then? Have you been charged? Are they pursuing this absurd allegation in court?
Yeah, well, so the first thing I want to say is I was just sitting on Saint Denis Street with my 4-year-old having ice cream. Okay, I'm sitting there and he walks by. That's the beginning of this, and he has all the video. He starts filming. His wife starts filming, who's also a well-known media personality. And I have all the video. We have all the video. There's all the threats or whatever. He can easily put that in the public domain at any moment he wanted to. And he hasn't done that. He hasn't put any video for the obvious reason. There were no threats. And he almost certainly lied to the police when he called, which, as you can see on the video, he says, he doesn't call the police, hey, something's happening. He says, I am Richard Martineau from the Journal de Montreal. And so he's inducing his name as a way to get the cops to come. So that's the first thing. And yes, I have been charged. And I have a date in court in November to deal with this. I put in for a request for the transcript of the 911 call because I want to hear what he said exactly. Of course, it's illegal to lie on a 911 call. I don't think that's all he did. I think he also called someone higher up in the police, some contact he has in the police, after he got off the 911 call, and that's part of why 4 cop cars showed up on Saint Denis Street to to deal with me. That standing there, and also it's really important to note is that they follow me back. I've already left. They were walking the opposite direction. He makes the cop call and then follows me back as I'm walking with my 4-year-old away from where we were. So he's on one hand claiming he felt threatened. On the other hand, he's like following me and like sicking the police on me. So it's
Oh my God.
it's a total farce. Unfortunately, I was found guilty by a judge for promoting an email petition campaign that began with dear and ended with sincerely around these odious charges around Dahlia Kurtz that were ultimately dropped. And I promoted an email petition campaign, and the police said I was harassing the police by promoting an email petition campaign. And they were able to actually get a judge to agree that was, we're appealing it. So it's not confirmed yet, but I was found guilty for this. So like this, you laugh at it, and I laugh at it. I think the whole thing's a farce, but the legal system, both at the policing level and at the judicial level, are actually willing to, take this stuff seriously when, of course, I was the one harassed. I had handcuffs put on me in front of my young daughter. They released them pretty quickly, and they made me stay there for an hour. This is the model. And, in terms of this, when my interaction, I've now had 2 interactions with Richard Martineau. And this guy, like, as you point out with the Islamophobia stuff, even when there's video, he's willing to just lie, like the most like ridiculous lies. Like the first time I interacted with him, when I asked him about the genocide, he says he spoke to me in English. Well, I have video showing that I'm speaking to him in French. I turned to English a couple of minutes into it. He claims that, I got aggressive. In fact, he stole my phone, right? So, and this is on the video. So like, this is who rises. I think the big picture political point is important to note. This is who becomes the important columnists in the important media outlets in our media institutions, right? The ones willing to lie in service of imperialism, in service of the billionaires, and there's no accountability because they're doing the bidding of the wealthy and powerful. And so, lying, crassly when there's video around, bringing cops into a situation where nothing but questions were asked, that's all sort of, acceptable. They get away with it, and, things move on.
Yeah, the wealthy and powerful, the very people whose interests Mark Carney prioritizes every day. Yves, we stand in solidarity with you, my friend, and please keep us apprised of where this second absurd prosecution leads. If there's any justice in this country, it'll get laughed out of court. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we're signing off from Montreal, Canada on August 22nd, 2026.
Thanks.